president. The question of Russian collusion, it's for me as a conservative Republican, and I know we have some Democrats in the House, and this is suitable for a dartboard if you don't want it. But I got into politics because of the anti-communism of Barry Goldwater. That's what attracted me to politics. I stayed in politics because of the anti-communism of Ronald Reagan. I hate the Russian system. It's a rotten, corrupt system where they persecute Christians, they persecute Jews, they persecute gypsies. This is a corrupt system. The president knows it. But is it worth going to thermonuclear war over Syria? You see, that's a different question. If you look at Syria, we have no friends here. Assad finances Hamas, he finances Hezbollah, he's propped up by the Russians, and on the other side, you have ISIS propped up by buddies. Where's our inherent national? Nobody here is really our friend, is truly our friend. I don't think it's worth a drop of American blood or a borrowed American dollar because to another country to bomb the hell out of them. Once the bombs have dropped, well, you've got a big bill on your hands. I'm sure many of you saw this horrific footage of the slave in India. This is the direct result of the U.S. ally. Yeah, he may have been crazy. All of his intelligence and ISIS with us. Bad decision. And as Congressman Walter Troy, D.C. told me, they gave a list of requirements under which they would just let him leave. And Congressman Fauntleroy, as part of a peace mission, took that to Gaddafi, memorializing them. Whereupon Congressman Fauntleroy forwarded this to the State Department. And then they killed him. Bad public policy. And this video of the slave markets, of African Americans being sold into slavery, being burned alive, being in cages, it's heartrending, it's sickening. And it's the result of a bad decision by the Obama administration to remove it. So we are headed, in my view, towards a constitutional crisis. In my opinion, the revelations in the last week or so about the partisan nature of the task force that Mueller has assembled, their financial support for the Clintons, for Obama, their text messages, their emails, their backgrounds, I think that they are, and thank goodness for Fox News, who has kind of led the way in terms of exposing all of this, this further divides and polarizes the country. So if the inquiry by Mr. Mueller, let's say that Mueller shoots and misses, well then I think you're going to see a swift uptick in the Trump is crazy talk. We already see it. Joe Scarborough moves it around a lot, and Don Lemon and Keith Olbermann. Although I don't know how you type when you're in a straitjacket. That surprised me. But and then we have under the 25th Amendment a procedure for removing a president who is allegedly non compos mentis. That procedure is a majority of the cabinet plus the vice president have the authority to remove the president. The president can appeal that decision and it goes to a vote of the U.S. House of Representatives. Now, someone who's very prominent in politics, someone you all know, a friend of mine, insists to me that his sources tell him that the current vice president and the Speaker of the House have already reached an agreement in which the Speaker would become vice president, in which case I think we know the results of a vote in the House to sustain or remove the president. I had trouble believing this in the beginning, but extraordinary research that I've just completed revealed to me that Speaker Ryan was well aware of the fact that the Awan brothers, the two Pakistani IT consultants hired by Deborah Wasserman Schultz, every man's first wife.
That was a good one.
I only got a little bit of shtick, what can I say? Had penetrated the House computers as early as September, had stolen $16 million in cash, had accessed and copied the email traffic of 45 members of Congress, and were presumably, in some cases, using that to blackmail members. Recall that no Democrat to date is willing to testify against the Awan brothers. But Paul Ryan knew that in September, and he kept it from the American people until after the election, presumably because he thought it would help the Republicans or help Trump and hurt the Democrats. So the idea of a vice presidential deal is not quite as far-fetched as the first time I heard it. I've done a hard vote count on the president's cabinet. I show him with 4 solid votes. I've got about 6 that I can't categorize, and I don't know, I think Jeff Sessions and Tillerson would probably vote against him. Mitch McConnell's wife, yeah, I think she'd vote against him too. You're going to get into a highly charged atmosphere, and you already see this Trump is crazy stuff. Now, I must tell you, I've known him 40 years. Seems exactly the same to me now when I talk to him as he seemed then. Eccentric? Yes. Unique? Yes. Impulsive? Yes. Crazy? No. Not really. So I don't know whether this gambit will succeed. I realize that this is a fairly negative prognostication, but it's where I see our politics going. Now, if there are Democrats in the House, you may be secretly thinking, well, I hope he's right. That's fine. I don't mind any kind of back and forth in the discussion of this, but we have gotten to the point where our politics has gotten more and more fractured. Now, I'm obviously a Republican, although I will admit that I briefly left the Republican Party to join the Libertarians. My father and my grandfather both died of cancer. Both had to undergo radiation and chemotherapy. They both died a horrific death. And when my grandfather was dying, and I saw that the drugs they were giving him, mostly morphine, were putting him in a place that was even more terrible. His weight dropped below 100 pounds. He had no appetite. He was in a terrible pain. And one of my cousins recommended marijuana, which at the time where I lived was illegal. But I procured it for him, and it brought back his appetite. And he started to put on weight. And I actually found him singing one morning. So I became committed to the cause of medicinal marijuana. Never smoked marijuana when I was in high school, never smoked it when I was in college, had no interest. I do like a stiff martini, I admit. But I went through the exact same experience with my father several years later. So I was deeply committed to the candidacy of Gary Johnson, the former governor of New Mexico. I had no illusions about his ability to win, but I felt that his campaign would be a platform to elevate the discussion of the efficacy of cannabis for healing and for medicinal reasons. In any event, I came back to the party of my of my family, the party that I have great sentimental attachment to, although I would admit to you that I was attracted to the old Republican Party of Barry Goldwater, a party that wanted government out of the bedroom, out of the boardroom, and out of your pocket. Not a party that lectured you on moral or social issues. The party was committed to low taxes and less regulation. A party that was committed to a strong national defense as a deterrent, as opposed to the neocon policy of the Bushes and the Clintons, where we seem to go around the world looking for wars to get into where our national interests are not clear. And I had concluded by 2012 that that Republican Party didn't exist anymore. And the truth was that both parties had morphed into one party. It was the party of Wall Street. It was the party of the special interests. That the Democrats and the Republicans really tried hard in election time to sound different. But folks, Obama told us he was closing Guantanamo and it's still open. And Trump told us we were getting out of Afghanistan, but we're still there. So the more you look at it, the more you begin to realize that the two major parties are pretty much identical. There's some small shadings of difference, but I came back to the Republican Party largely because I viewed Trump's nomination as the hostile takeover of the party of Lincoln. And I had high hopes that he could bring the party back to its roots as the party of the middle class, the party of working people. Meanwhile, the idea that the Democratic Party, the party of John Kennedy and Harry Truman, the party of anti-communism, will not stand up to the threat of Islamic terrorism boggles the mind, just boggles the mind. So it demonstrates the extent to which the two parties have very much become alike, despite their attempts to rhetorically sound different. Where will this go? It is anybody's guess. Now, as I said, I'm a Republican, but I have to be honest with you. If I had lived in Alabama, I could not have voted for Roy Moore. Just could not do so. His views seem to be from another century. He was saying yesterday, his wife said yesterday, we're not anti-Semitic, one of our lawyers is a Jew. I mean, he actually said on election day that he thought homosexual activity between two consenting adults should be illegal. No, I think what two adults do in their bedroom is their business. So this guy was a Neanderthal. And people don't realize that the first round of the Alabama primary had 4 candidates. The former Attorney General, who was appointed to the Senate, Luther Strange, who I think was exceedingly beloved. Judge Moore, who's run 5 times statewide and never been successful. Congressman Mo Brooks, who's a moderate conservative Republican, and a fellow named Dr. Randy Brinson, who's an entrepreneur, businessman, and an early Trump supporter. I supported Dr. Brinson, sent him a check. He's a good man. Every time he would find a potential donor for his campaign, Mitch McConnell and the boys from the Senate Campaign Committee would show up and turn his money off. I tell you all this only because the president was told that this was a 2-person race, and that he had to choose between Luther Strange and Mo Brooks. And frankly, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, had the hammerlock on him for Luther Strange. Well, as we now know, there were other choices, and Roy Moore, who is too extreme even for Alabama, was able to squeeze out a primary victory in a second round over the hopelessly corrupt and establishment-tagged Luther Strange. Now, it's also instructive, going into Election Day, that the polls were all over the place. You notice that one poll showed that Moore would win, another one showed that Jones would win. A word of caution about polls. And I know that people who are interested in politics have a fascination with them. But polls can be affected by the sample size, by the order of the questions, by the formulation and wording of the questions, by the sample being drawn properly or improperly. And what you saw in the run-up to the 2016 election was a number of pollsters, perfectly capable professionals, but making the decision that the electorate of 2016 would be identical to the electorate of 2012, the same number of whites and blacks and Catholics and Jews and men and women and all age stratus, and that was never realistic. We had the first African-American president running for re-election. It was not unreasonable to think that he would pull a larger, disproportionately larger African-American vote, and he did. It was never realistic to believe that Hillary Clinton would score nearly as well among those voters as Obama did. She didn't. She ran substantially behind where he ran. She won them, but not by the margins that he won them. And that explains why you had so many polls saying that Trump would not win. You also had an enormous rural vote, which came out in record numbers that had never come out before, and nobody had factored that into their calculations. So the polls in Alabama didn't tell us much. I took them all pretty much with a grain of salt. What would I do now? If I were the president, I would invite Doug Jones to the White House right now. He has to run for re-election in Alabama in 2 years. 3 years, pardon me. And Alabama is still a ruby red state. It is still a conservative state. And Doug Jones will not get reelected as a liberal Democrat. The Democrats who have represented Alabama, like Howell Heflin and Rick Shelby, are conservative Democrats. I think that Jones could be a bridge. He could be a go-between. People are ready to get something done. They're ready for legislative progress on numerous fronts. And frankly, I think moderate Democrats help that equation. So I would launch an immediate charm offensive if I were the president. I'd invite the new senator and his family in for a picture and sit down and talk to him. I don't know if the president would do that. If I have the opportunity to talk to him this weekend, I'm going to suggest it. But I do think that it would be a mistake, as is happening all over the media today, to read too much into one election. Yes, it is not a good day for Donald Trump. It's particularly not a good day for Stephen Bannon. But what can you say about a man who wears 3 button-down shirts on top of each other? Figure that out. For those of you who don't know, I have now in my 12th year, on New Year's Day, I produce Mr. Stone's International Best and Worst Dressed list. I picked this up from the late Mr. Blackwell. You may remember him. He was a Hollywood designer and critic, and he could make or break the career of a movie star or starlet or a socialite or an athlete and so on. And I thought it was a great tradition. And I'm not going to say who will be on the worst dressed list this year, Michael Moore, or who else might be on, Steve Bannon. But I really, and I don't have the withering tongue that he had, but this is something I'm in my 12th year. The Daily Caller and the New York Post usually run it. So I'm open for nominees right now. And my list is not all, it's men and women, but it's not all famous people. It's not all celebrities. I'm interested in civilians who may be particularly stylish. fashion is ephemeral. Fashion comes and goes, but style will always be with us. Gentlemen, a navy blue blazer will always be in fashion. So anyway, with that, it's kind of my political observations. I gave a little bit of my style observations, and I would be happy to take a few questions.